Lord Scin and I tore this place apart looking for her. They killed a Force user, burned its body, and placed it into a cage for us to find. It was my fault, Grand Master. Taba said as Darth Bruticus held his hand up, shook his head and said, "No, don't beat yourself up over this. It was good that we came here. We found the Outer Rim Temple and destroyed it. We lost not one Sith in the battle and the Jedi were killed. Now let's go home and rest. My friend. There will be other battles soon to fight and Kalana will appear to us in time." Darth Mazarill was in the council chambers as Darth Bruticus arrived. He was exhausted from the trip and needed to rest. But the Supreme Master had other plans for the Sith Master. "I want you to return and kill Seiko Buroc. I'm tired of playing with him and I want him destroyed." Darth Mazarill got up from his seat and said, "If I return they will know it's me behind the attacks. And they will kill me." Darth Bruticus looked over at the young master and began to laugh. "Young one. You think too small. You honestly think that I would send you in harm's way?" The Sith Master looked over at the Supreme Master Who, blinked his eyes repeatedly and gave a smile. Darth Mazarill frowned at Darth Bruticus and said, "You've got problems, Master, and I don't think that batting your eyes is going to help, let alone give me any confidence." He turned and walked out of the council chambers. Darth Bruticus stood and stared out of the window at the apprentices training with Darth Lazar and Darth Noraa. He sat down at his seat in front of the controls and VIEWSCREENS. He pushed a button and MZ-12 appeared with Darth Lilith. "Supreme Master," they bowed and said. "We have 10 citidels and 4 temples up and running in the Outer Rim and Wild Space. We have 20,000 new troops and more are on the way." Darth Bruticus shook his head. "That's not enough, MZ. We'll need at least 2 million just to fight the Republic Navy. Get the Sith Hounds together, I have an idea." Lord Scin returned to the temple on Korriban and was watching his death squad train. 6 of the most deadly Sith were at his personal command and would do anything for him. Even fight to the death. The Dark Master and his apprentices entered the lightsaber training area and was standing among 500 spectators who were waiting to fight the best of the best. The Sith Master turned to the 6 and said, "Take them." Suddenly he felt a disturbance and put his arm out. "Wait," they stopped and looked at their master. "Follow me. Something is going on. Let's go," he said, and they left the room. Darth Lucratis stood in the corner of the war room watching them. They didn't think that anyone was there but he was. And he saw every move that they made. As second in command and the most stealthly Sith in the Order. He knew that there were spies. All of these idiots were once Jedi and now they are turning against us, he whispered to himself. He froze against the wall as they approached. 4 apprentices walked by and didn't even notice the Sith Master standing there. Darth Lucratis came out of his hiding place and crept behind them. He turned on his saber and spoke. "Hey Jedi." They turned around as the Sith Master swung his saber across their heads, cutting off the tops of their thinking caps. The bodies fell to the floor. Out in the hall 2 apprentices saw what had happened and tried catching the Sith Lord off guard as they charged forward attempting to attack him. Darth Lucratis held up his hand and lightning shot out of his fingertips and made contact with one of the students. Who had no time to deflect the attack. It threw the student 20 feet across the Great Hall and embedded its lifeless body into a marble pillar. Using the Force, Darth Lucratis stripped the skin off the other student, making a fist with his hand. The student cried out in pain as his bones were breaking. His body crumpled into a ball of bloody flesh. That caught the attention of every passerby. The Dark Lord Force kicked the flesh heap across the temple and left the war room. Seeing that every apprentice was staring at him in horror, he yelled out, "That's what we do to traitors. Spies." And Sith Who returned to the light. 10 super freighters docked at the temple. A voice came over the intercom and said, "Darth Bruticus. Lucratis. Taba. Noraa. Mazarill. Lazar. Kamenwati. And Lord SCIN report to the northwest landing pads immediately. The voice repeated the message again. Darth Bruticus arrived first at the pad and was met by MZ-12 and Darth Lilith. The two of them bowed and MZ spoke. Supreme Master. The Sith hounds that you requested have arrived and are ready for the mission. My lord, Darth Bruticus smiled and saw the other Sith masters and trusted members of the Order gathering around him outside. Darth Lucratis has brought something of grave importance to my attention. Many apprentices have betrayed us and returned to the Jedi. Due to this I will purge our Temple of the Jedi, the Supreme Master said as he nodded to MZ-12. Who opened the freighters and thousands of Sith hellhounds ran out and into the temple. Darth Kamenwati used the Force. Shut and locked the entrance and exit doors. Feast my friends. There is plenty for everyone, Darth Bruticus yelled as he shut the final door. We have 5 million troopers ready to deploy for Naboo and we are making more as we speak, MZ-12 said as the Masters stood in a circle discussing the upcoming battle. The Jedi will fall from their grace and this will be the biggest Sith war ever, Darth Bruticus added. The Sith hounds were chasing down their food in the temple on Korriban. There was nowhere to hide. They were born here many thousands of years ago and knew every place to hide that could be thought of, and the so-called Jedi were greatly outnumbered. The hounds didn't lose a single one to the enemy. They killed and ate their fill. Bones and all, nothing went to waste. Later Darth Bruticus summoned them back to the super freighters and they departed to Naboo. Lord Kamenwati climbed into his ship. Where are you going? Darth Lazar asked. Walking over to the Dark Lord. The Sith hellhounds are going to Naboo. Which is the biggest Jedi temple in the galaxy, and I'm going to see the fun, Darth Kamenwati said as the cockpit hatch shut. The engines started and the SITHFIGHTER left the landing pad bound for Naboo. Darth Bruticus looked at Lord SCIN and said, Send 6 legions of troops to Naboo. I have a feeling that Master Kamenwati will get into trouble and need the help, Darth Lazar bowed and said. I'll go with them, Master. We're under fire, Darth Kamenwati screamed into his comlink as he barely dodged out of the way from a missile hitting his ship. The Hellhounds were destroyed the moment they landed and the Jedi have a grand army with the Republic. He turned to see Gungans attacking him from the forest. Using a Sith mind trick. Darth Kamenwati waved his hand at the Gungan leaders and said, You will attack the Republic and the Jedi. They are your enemies, he commanded. The army of Gungans walked by him and started their attack on the Republic. Lord Kamenwati set a homing beacon and began clearing trees with his lightsaber for an ambush. When he finished, the Dark Lord began building traps and setting bombs when he felt a dark presence. He turned around and was face to face with Darth Lazar. Well, hello Lord Kamenwati. You know, of all my years as a Sith Lord I've never seen a Sith farmer before. Maybe you should get a hat. Boots. And a rake, he said laughing. Darth Kamenwati found no humor in anything he said and force pushed Darth Lazar face first through the mud and into a bush of ivy leaves. The dirty Dark Lord ignored it and only laughed harder. You know, people have said less and died more horrible deaths than you will if you keep talking. Darth Kamenwati said as he stepped on Darth Lazar's head and smashed his face deeper into the mud. Darth Lazar got up and wiped the mud from his face and started scratching his face. Neck. And arms. What did I slide through? The Joker asked. Darth Kamenwati shrugged his shoulders and said. I don't know. All I saw was mud. Darth Lazar walked away talking to himself and said. Yep. Farmer Kamenwati here to plow the forest, he said and started laughing again when Darth Kamenwati used the Force and tripped the Sith Lord into a big mud puddle face first. SGT. Ashcraft helped Darth Lazar to his feet and said. Let me know when you two lovebirds are done with your mating calls so we can prepare for this attack. He was cut off by the veteran Sith Lord. Who motioned the troops to spread out and said. Await my orders. Hold your positions, they are coming, Darth Kamenwati said. Using the Force, he sensed the Republic forces advancing on their position. As they got closer, the troops tripped the signal flares and froze in their tracks. Darth Kamenwati turned his saber on and Force ran through the forest toward the enemy. General, it's a Jedi, the soldier said as the Sith Lord ran his saber through his chest. He took a step back and pulled the burning blade from his body. Then spun the weapon around and cut off the heads of the 4 troops standing on both sides of the first victim. Attack! Darth Lazar yelled, leading the Sith troops toward the enemy. Darth Kamenwati turned around and held out his hand and yelled. Stop! The Sithlord stopped along with the legions of troops behind him. There's no need to attack just yet. My friend, watch and learn from a veteran warrior, Darth Kamenwati said, putting away his lightsaber and whispered a spell. A red and black flame appeared in the palm of his hand. Using the Force, he blew at the flame which engulfed the forest before the Sith army and spread to the Republic troops and Jedi, burning them instantly. Darth Lazar stood next to Darth Kamenwati and said in a low voice, "You'll have to teach me that one day." Darth Kamenwati looked down and smiled at his friend and said, "I'd be honored to, my friend. I'd be honored to." Darth Lazar's comlink started beeping. "Yes?" he asked. "We have 4 more legions approaching the planet, sir," a trooper said. "Master Smith," a Jedi said, running to catch up to his master. "Master, we've spotted several ships coming out of hyperspace and are headed this way," the Jedi said as Master Smith entered the council chambers and sat down at his seat as the young Jedi tried to warn the masters. "There are almost 1 million troops attacking us and you are all sitting on your butts looking at me like I'm crazy," he yelled. Grand Master Traz held up his hand and said, "Be silent, young one. We are well aware of the EMEMIES numbers, and they are nowhere near ours. This grand temple is bigger than the other temples combined and houses over 5 million Jedi and millions of troops. Plus there is the temple on Tatooine if we need any assistance. So there is no way we can be defeated. Now if you would, see your way out of the chamber so that we may start the day's business." The young Jedi bowed and said, "I'm sorry masters for my worry." Master Smith sat and rubbed his chin. He suddenly felt a flutter in the Force, and the Grand Master was lying. As the boy was leaving, he got up from his seat and bowed to the council and said, "Excuse me masters, but I've got some business of great importance to attend to." He and followed the boy out of the chambers. The Master Jedi looked out of the windows and saw the enemy. Commander Snow walked up behind Master Smith and spoke. "Master, we've returned from the front and the enemy generals are using lightsabers, red lightsabers. Have you ever seen a color like that before?" The Master Jedi closed his eyes and began to meditate. A few moments later he opened his eyes and said, "No, I have not, Commander. Let me look into that and I'll get back to you. In the meantime, continue your attack. And send out the bombers." Commander Snow saluted the Jedi and said, "Yes sir. Right away," and ran away. Confused, Master Smith and the boy walked to the lifts. "Master, where are we going?" the boy asked. They entered the lift. Master Smith pushed a button and looked down at the boy and said, "To the library. To search for the truth." High above the forest canopy a man sat and watched the battle unfold. Wondering how they got away with their treachery. The hate in him had subsided and faded away, for now. In the distance he saw the Jedi and their armies assembling outside of the temple. The Sith army was hundreds of feet below him and had no idea that he was there. "I'll just sit back and stay out of history's way for the time being and let the Jedi and Sith scum destroy each other. Then I will take over," he whispered to himself. The bounty hunter's ship landed on a floating landing pad on Coruscant. Well, Jarsa Fett. I told you to never, ever meet me here. My job." The man was cut off by Jarsa. Who grabbed him by the throat and said, "You listen to me." Jarsa was cut off as well by one of the man's guards. Who hit him in the back with his pike so hard that he let go of his grip and fell to the ground. The guard returned to his position next to the man. Jarsa stood up and said. The Sith and Jedi are fighting as planned. I know what I'm doing. The Sith have no knowledge about my plans. Fett returned to his ship and flew away. Moments later another ship landed and the cockpit opened. 4 Jedi exited the ship while the Grand Master walked over to the man. Bowed and said, "Hello Chancellor. It is an honor to finally meet you in person." The Supreme Chancellor bowed and said, "Thank you. It is an honor for me as well." The new Chancellor showed a worried look on his face and the Grand Master was quick to notice that something was wrong with him. "Something troubles you, sir?" the Jedi asked. The Chancellor nodded and said softly, "I have some terrible news, Grand Master. The Outer Rim Temple has been defeated and it's the work of a horrible man." The Grand Jedi nodded and said, "I see. And do you have his name, sir?" The Chancellor stood still and said nothing. The Jedi placed his hand on the shoulder of the Supreme Leader and said, "We will protect you from him. I sense that he is a great threat to you. Just give me his name and I personally will deal with him. I promise. My friend." The Chancellor wiped his face and said, "His name is Jarsa Fett." The Jedi bowed and said, "Thank you, my friend. I will take care of this right away, sir." He turned and walked back to the ship, taking 2 of the 4 Jedi along with him, leaving 2 behind to guard the Supreme Chancellor. The ship flew away and the Jedi were following the Chancellor back to his ship. "I don't need your protection, Jedi. I have bigger things to do than to haul you 2 bumbling idiots around all day," the Chancellor said. The 2 Jedi looked over at each other and the Chancellor's guards took off their masks, dropped their pikes and each ignited a blue lightsaber and engaged the 2 Jedi. The guards moved very fast and quickly struck down the Jedi. Using the Force, the Chancellor pushed the Jedi off of the landing pad to the ground, several thousand feet below. The guards returned to the Chancellor's side and bowed. "Thank you, my loyal friends. I will help you with the destruction with the Jedi," the Chancellor said, putting up his hood. The 2 guards took their hoods off and said, "Thank you for your allegiance, Lord Sidious," the guard said. "No. Thank you, Supreme Master Bruticus and Darth Lucratis, for bringing me here," Darth Sidious said. The old Sith Master bowed to the 2 young Sith. The 3 boarded an ancient Sithfightr and flew to the Senate. As they flew around Coruscant, Lord Sidious looked out of the window at everything. "So much has changed since my time. I don't recognize anything here," Darth Sidious said. Darth Bruticus looked back and said, "You are the Supreme Chancellor of the future. My lord. Nothing from your time is here. Everything has been rebuilt." Lord Sidious looked around as Darth Lucratis flew the ship. "How far in the future am I?" the old master asked. "You are 1,200,000 years after the Battle of Yavin. Darth Lucratis said. The Chancellor looked at him confused. Darth Bruticus said, "After the first destruction of the first Death Star." Lord Sidious nodded and said, "Ah yes. Now I remember that battle," he said furiously. "The Jedi are many, my lord. Many more than what you and Darth Vader destroyed," Darth Lucratis said. "How many?" Sidious asked. Darth Bruticus shrugged his shoulders and said, "We're not exactly sure, my lord. We estimate 5 million Jedi and millions of Republic troops. We have 5 million Sith troops and 8 Sith lords, sir." Darth Sidious nodded as he stared out of the window and said, "All of this in one temple?" Darth Bruticus looked back and said, "No, Lord Sidious. They have 7 temples that we know of. One of them we destroyed on Tatooine a few weeks ago and now we have 6 legions of troops on Naboo to destroy the Jedi's Grand Temple there." The ship landed at the Senate and the 3 exited the ship and was welcomed by a committee and news. "I'm honored to be chosen for this position of Supreme Chancellor in this time of war. I will do everything in my power to rid the galaxy of these evil forces." He bowed as the crowd came forward to meet and interview the new Chancellor. After what seemed to be an endless eternity of questions, he was led away along with the 2 Sith Lords to his apartment. Once inside, the Sith sat down and the Chancellor was served a cup of tea. "We need to get to work as soon as possible on this matter. After I take a nap I will need to be briefed on all current situations." Darth Lucratis nodded and said, "I'll do that, my lord." Also the Jedi of this time have no idea of the Sith presence or that we exist, Darth Lucratis said. If you have the ability to time travel. Why me? Why not get Exar Kun? Marka Ragnos. Or Darth Bane, why me? Darth Sidious asked. Darth Bruticus drank his tea and said. Well, I won't get Darth Bane cuz I broke his holocron. Sidious and Lucratis looked at Darth Bruticus in wonder. I got tired of his rule of two declaration and his constant complaining, so I broke the holocron, he said. Darth Sidious started to laugh and asked. Do the cloning facilities on Kamino still exist? Darth Lucratis nodded and said. Yes, but they are not on Kamino anymore. We had them moved and spread out across the galaxy. The facilities are much, much larger. And the Republic is paying for it. Some time later the ancient Dark Lord retired to his room and went to sleep. Darth Bruticus got up from the couch and headed for the door. I'm going to Korriban to assist Lord Taba and I'll be back in a few days. You stay here and get Darth Sidious up to date, and be careful. He is known to kill Sith. Especially in their sleep. Darth Bruticus returned to Korriban and was greeted by Darth Taba. Master. I was just informed about you and Darth Lucratis bringing Darth Sidious to the future. Lord Bruticus nodded and tossed some smelly fruit in his mouth. Do you have to eat that crap in front of me? Taba said while taking a few steps away from the Dark Lord. You know that it's a very, very bad idea to have him here. He'll help us destroy the Jedi and slap us with a Sith's version of Order 66. I sense that he will try to pull something against us. Darth Bruticus placed his hand on the young Sith's shoulder and said. He won't pull anything, young one. We are all aware of his powers and I will not allow it to transpire. If I even sense that he is even going to attempt any such thing, I'll vaporize him. Darth Taba smacked the Grand Master's hand off of his shoulder and said. You are blind, Master. He will try something and you should be grateful that I warned you, because if he does try anything, I will personally kill him and the people who brought him here, he said and walked away. Darth Bruticus had a surprised look on his face. Darth Taba never, ever spoke to him like that before. He thought of what the Sith Master said and then popped another piece of smelly fruit in his mouth. He stood on the landing pad and watched Darth Taba walk away and he didn't look back. Entering the Sith temple and climbing the stairs. He watched the droids clean up the remains of the so-called Jedi. What a waste. You build up the Sith army with 10,000 or more apprentices and then on a whim you destroy them all. What a waste, Darth Taba said to himself while sitting on the rail looking down at the workers. It wasn't a waste, my friend. Darth Taba turned his head to see Lord Scin standing next to him polishing the hilt of one of his lightsabers. Darth Lucratis has proof of their treachery. He saw them in the war room communicating with the Jedi, Lord Scin said. Darth Taba shook his head. So they kill the entire temple instead of the ones that were responsible. You can't punish an entire temple of Sith for a few screw-ups. The Jedi still have no idea who we are, he said, closing his eyes and meditating. But someone is searching for the truth of us as I speak. He opened his eyes and said. Master Smith is very resourceful, and very nosy. He will discover the truth of the Sith. But since the Sith have regained the position of Supreme Chancellor, I guess I might request something of him to keep the Jedi busy, Darth Taba said. My first act as Supreme Chancellor is to sadly announce that the Republic can no longer fund so many Jedi temples. So the ones on Tatooine, Toydaria, and Yavin will be closed. I'm sorry, my friends, but the Republic is going to experience some Jedi and soldier cuts. Tom Jerics could hear no more. He got up and turned off the TV. Hey, I was watching that, a voice from behind him said. Tom turned around and saw a Jedi spirit sitting in the corner staring up at the big screen. What the hell are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in Jedi heaven or something? Tom asked. Ha 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 ha. That was really funny, kid. I'm here to give my assistance to the Grand Master. What about you? The Jedi asked. Tom sat down across from the Jedi. I'm the cook's assistant. So the new Chancellor is closing down the temples. That's just great of him. It will bring more Jedi here or to the Grand Temple on Naboo. The spirit looked in wonder. Grand Temple, he asked. Tom nodded. Yes, the Grand Temple on Naboo has the capacity to hold up to 10 million Jedi, Tom said as he wiped the crumbs off of the table and threw them in the trash using the Force. Nice trick, kid. Is that all you do as assist the cook? The spirit asked. Darth Bruticus and MZ-12 were discussing the next plans of attack on the hologram table in the middle of the council chambers. Where is Master Lucratis? MZ asked. The Sith Grand Master stared at the hologram for a minute and said. He is babysitting Darth Sidious. The droid nodded. So you two really went into the past and grabbed the Dark Lord? He asked. Yes. We did, and now I'm starting to regret it. Darth Bruticus walked around the table. Found a chair and sat down. He pulled a black satin bag from his cloak and started eating. My lord. Is that the smelly fruit that everyone keeps complaining about? MZ asked. The Sith Grand Master smiled and nodded. Yep, this is it, he said, picking a piece out of the bag and tossing it into his mouth. He said, extending the bag out to the droid. You wanna try some? He asked. MZ-12 grabbed the bag, opened the chamber doors, and threw the bag of fruit out, and it landed on the floor outside the doors as Darth Taba walked by and stepped on the bag. Squish. Ew, Taba said, bending over and picking up the bag of fruit. Did someone lose their bag of bantha poodoo? He asked. Darth Bruticus said nothing and shut the doors. Looking over at MZ, he gave the droid an evil look. That was my last bag of fruit, you bucket of bolts, the Dark Lord said as he pulled a piece of fruit from his pocket and raised his hand to his mouth. Of course, my lord. Since you eat that fruit. You do know how it is prepared and what it is originally used for, MZ-12 said as Darth Bruticus's hand froze just before he threw the piece into his mouth. He slowly turned his head and looked at the droid. I'm sure you also know that the fruit isn't for human consumption. The Dark Lord was still staring at the droid and the piece of fruit fell from his hand and on the floor. Well, now I have your complete attention. As you know, the fruit is grown on Ziost. It is soaked in Tarentateke urine to preserve its transportation to Korriban, Ilum, and other planets where it is washed and re-soaked in the urine for a stronger effect. The Sinley Corporation mixes it with other animal urines and blends it into a liquid that they spray on the celings and walls of caves on Ilum. For example, to keep spiders and other nasty monsters occupied while they collect the crystals for the Jedi lightsabers. The rejected or rotten fruit is re-boxed and shipped back here for your consumption. If you would like, I can contact the Sinley Corporation and see if they need a urine extractor on Tatooine at their processing plant. Darth Bruticus looked as if he was going to vomit. MZ-12 stood behind the Dark Lord and added, they extract urine from Banthas, and from what I hear it's a very smelly and nasty process. The Sith Grand Master adjusted himself in his chair as MZ got up and poured him a glass of blue milk and placed a trash can into his lap. I'll leave you two alone, sir, he giggled. Patted the Sith Lord on the back and left the room. Siko Buroc sat on a fallen pillar and looked around at the nearly destroyed temple. Bodies littered the floor. Depa Gival's spirit appeared sitting next to the Grand Master. I don't know why you're here. My friend. I haven't any Jedi. They are all dead, Siko said, placing his head into his hands. Depa rose from his seat and looked around. Siko, get up. There is one person alive, and if you don't get to her in time, she will die, the spirit said. The Grand Master got up and Force jumped up to the third floor. Sifting through stone, wood, and steel, the Jedi found the young woman, picked her up and ran her to what was left of the infirmary and started healing her almost lifeless body. Using the Force, Siko Buroc quickly mended her crushed ribs, and repaired 2 medical droids and left them to further repair her. Depa entered the room. My friend, there is no time to spare. A Dark Lord is on his way and you must stop him or the Jedi will be extinct. The Grand Master nodded and left the room, making his way to the Great Hall on the ground floor as Darth Mazarill entered the temple holding a red lightsaber in his hand. He spotted the Grand Master Jedi Who was standing there waiting for him. He took off his cloak and turned his lightsaber on. You worthless Jedi. After I kill you, Lord Bruticus will return and take over this temple for the Sith, Mazarill said. Seiko Buroc yawned and took a seat on a marble pillar waiting for his enemy. Can you hurry this up? I have things to do, youngling, and you're slowing me down, the Grand Master said. The hate swelled in Darth Mazarill and he growled as he leapt over the pillar and slammed his saber down on the floor as he landed on the ground. But the Jedi wasn't there. He looked up and saw the Jedi standing 10 feet away. Is that the fastest you can move? I'm very unimpressed in Darth Bruticus's choice in younglings. It's very poor, Seiko said, taunting the Sith. Seiko lunged forward and engaged the Sith. Behind him the Sith slaves entered the temple and were slowly advancing on him as Darth Mazarill lowered his saber and shot force lightning at the Jedi. Who caught the attack and turned around, sending the lightning toward the slaves, shocking them to death and throwing them through the west side entrance doors and into a statue, knocking it over and rolling it down the concrete steps, dragging the lifeless bodies down with it. The Jedi took a defensive stance as the Sith jumped once again. Seiko used the Force and blocked the Sith and his attack with a 50-foot-long pillar that sent the Sith Master skidding across the floor. The Jedi ran toward his enemy, raised his arm to strike as Darth Mazarill sat up and Force grabbed him by the throat, lifting the Jedi 4 feet off the floor. The Dark Lord stood up and turned his saber on. This is the end for you, Jedi, he said, thrusting the saber into the Jedi's chest. Nice. Nice job, youngling, the Grand Master said, walking around a pillar and swung his saber across the Sith Master's chest. Darth Mazarill jumped backward and took off his shirt to inspect his wound. You're dead, he yelled. No. I'm alive and in perfect condition, that was a hologram, Seiko laughed. Force pulling the Sith toward him and engaging him in battle once again. The Jedi swung down hard as the Sith raised his saber over his head to block and brought his saber down in front of his chest to block a quick thrust attack. The Jedi Master was extremely fast and agile. He blocked almost all of Darth Mazarill's attacks. He received a burn across his neck but kept fighting like nothing had happened.